The morning sun climbed over the ridgeline, casting slow gold across the camp as the Japanese female prisoners of war stepped onto the open field, unsure of what the British guards truly intended, yet drawn forward by a faint curiosity that seemed to thicken the air around them, leaving them wondering what unseen force was starting to stir ahead. They moved in cautious groups, their footsteps soft in the dust, while the guards arranged wooden stakes and cloth markers into shapes that resembled games from a world far from war. And though the women held themselves with wary restraint, they could not ignore the strange sense that something beyond simple amusement awaited them just out of sight. The field buzzed with the low hum of soldiers preparing contests, while the women exchanged glances that spoke of fear and fascination blended together, and the day felt like a strange dream in which enemies stepped briefly out of their assigned roles, yet every shift of the guard's stance hinted that the dream might twist in unexpected ways. Still hidden in the growing heat-tone, British soldier demonstrated the first activity, a race between small groups across the uneven ground, and the women watched his steady movements, noting the quiet confidence in his steps, and though they tried to keep their faces unreadable, they sensed an unfamiliar feeling taking root within them, as if the ground beneath them carried whispers of something deeper about to emerge. When the call to begin sounded, the women hesitated, their bodies frozen between obedience and instinct, but then they stepped forward into the sun, their breaths quickening as the guards waved them on, and each heartbeat felt heavier than the last, as though the race itself was only a doorway to something waiting beyond the far edge of the field. They moved into position, the dust swirling around their feet, and as the British soldiers encouraged them with calm gestures, the women felt the tension of captivity mingle with an odd awareness that these men were showing a kind of respect not often seen in the harshness of war, and the strangeness of that feeling made the air electric with possibilities that none of them dared to voice. As the race began with a burst of movement, the prisoners running in uneven strides, while the guards followed alongside, calling out support, and though the women were used to commands barked with force, the gentle tone of this moment unsettled them, as if the soldiers knew something about them that they themselves had not yet discovered, drawing them toward a truth still hidden in the distancia. As the women neared the finish line, they felt eyes on them, not with cruelty, but with a quiet admiration that caught them off guard, and they slowed as if trying to understand the shift that had taken place, yet the answer escaped them, slipping through their thoughts like water, leaving them with a sense that the day was only beginning to reveal its purpose. After the race, the guards guided the women to the shade where wooden planks had been set up for a balancing contest, and the prisoners studied the guards with growing curiosity, noticing the patient way they explained the activity without harshness, and each gesture seemed to peel back a layer of their fear, suggesting that something unexpected was forming between them. Just out of reach, women stepped onto the planks, wobbling as they tried to maintain balance, while the British soldiers stood nearby, ready to catch them if they fell, and this simple act of closeness unsettled the prisoners in ways they could not name, stirring warmth they had not felt since before captivity, and with each passing moment they sensed that the boundary between guard and captive was shifting in ways that defied the world outside the compass. One woman slipped forward, a soldier caught her by the arms, steadying her with surprising gentleness, and the brief contact sent a wave of confusion through her, making her look into his eyes, where she saw no hostility, only calm patience that made her heart pound, as though urging her to understand something she had not yet realized but felt growing stronger with every second. The games continued, with laughter from both sides rising into the heavy afternoon air, and the women felt their guards slowly lowering, not by choice but by the strange gravity of the moment, which seemed to pull them closer to these men who were supposed to be their captors, yet behaved in a way that unsettled everything they thought they knew, leaving them suspended between fear and awakening. As the sun dipped lower, the prisoners and soldiers gathered for the final event, a teamwork task involving ropes and wooden crates, and the women found themselves working side by side with the British guards, their hands brushing their footsteps, aligning, and each small point of contact felt like a spark that illuminated corners of their thoughts they had long kept dark, leaving them waiting for what the next moment might reveal. Activity grew more intense as the crates grew heavier and the challenge more difficult, and the women watched how the soldiers moved with determination tempered by kindness, offering assistance not as conquerors but as partners in the moment. And this subtle shift carried a power that pressed into the prisoners' hearts, urging them to look deeper into the faces beside them, where something unspoken seemed to shinobi. The time the crates were set down, the field had grown quiet except for the sound of breathing from both prisoners and guards, and as they stood together in the fading light, the women felt a collective realization rising within them that these men were not mere symbols of an enemy, but individuals shaped by their own burdens and their own humanity. And the weight of that revelation filled the silence with a tension that hinted at something larger still waiting to surface. Finally, as the guards prepared the last surprise of the day, a closing activity known only to them, the women sensed that everything leading to this moment had been building toward a truth none of them could yet grasp, and the air thickened with anticipation as they stepped forward, wondering what final turn this strange and unsettling day would take next. The afternoon light softened into a muted glow over the camp as the final phase of the unusual sports day began, and the Japanese female prisoners stood in a loose semicircle, watching the British soldiers prepare the last challenge, sensing that this moment carried a weight unlike anything that had come before, stirring a quiet tension that wrapped itself around every breath. Guards arranged a series of wooden crates into narrow pathways and invited the women to step forward in pairs. One prisoner matched with one soldier, and though hesitation flickered through their expressions, they moved ahead, compelled by a force they did not fully understand, as though something within the day itself was urging them toward a truth that had long waited in silence. The first pair began navigating the winding course, the prisoner blindfolded and the soldier speaking in low, steady tones, guiding her through each uncertain step. And as the women watched, they felt the boundary between captor and captive bend in a way that unsettled the foundations of everything war had taught them, yet the deeper meaning remained just out of reach, like a whisper carried by wind. When the blindfolded woman reached the end and removed the cloth, she looked up at the soldier who had guided her, and her companions saw in her eyes a shift, a glimmer of admiration, shaped not by surrender but by recognition of shared humanity, and the sight of it left them shaken, as though the moment had opened a door none of them had expected to find. The next pairs entered the course, each experiencing the same unnerving closeness, the careful guidance, the quiet reassurance that seemed to reach into forgotten parts of their memories. And with every completed path, the women felt their confusion deepen as admiration for the soldiers began to form like faint shapes rising through mist, hinting at something larger waiting to be revealed. When the final pair finished the challenge, the guards gathered everyone in the center of the field, where the long shadows stretched across the dust and the air held a stillness that felt almost sacred, as if the day itself were pausing to acknowledge what had quietly unfolded between these two opposing sides, bound together for a moment beyond the reach of where a British officer stepped forward and spoke in a calm, steady tone, explaining that the purpose of the sports day had been more than distraction, more than morale. It had been a rare attempt to remind both prisoners and guards that beneath the uniforms and the orders lived individuals capable of respect and even admiration. And though the women understood his words, the deeper meaning pulsed far stronger in the silence afterward. As the women returned toward their quarters holding the wooden tokens given earlier, they felt a strange warmth lingering from the day, a quiet connection that neither side could fully name yet could not deny. And with each step they carried the unsettling realization that the soldiers they had feared were also men shaped by hope and discipline, and a gentleness that had revealed itself in ways impossible to forget. At night, as the camp settled into darkness, the women lay awake, replaying the moments of guidance, the steady voices, the unexpected kindness, and though they could not speak openly of the admiration growing within them, they felt it all the same, blooming quietly in the shadows like a fragile truth waiting for dawn to bring its next revelation. As the final echo of the day lingered in the stillness with a promise yet unfinished,